Chappelle,
Here.
Commissioner Paraskovas,
Here.
Commissioner Sorsler,
Here.
and Commissioner Adams, who is not present but indicated she would be here shortly. Commissioner Cohen, Commissioner Jay, and Commissioner Middlestat are all absent.
Okay. For those in attendance tonight, have you had a chance to review the minutes from the May 3rd, 2021 meeting? There are no corrections. We can do a motion.
No, but you can't do a motion right now. You got to wait until Natasha's here.
Oh, well. Okay, then. I'll
that's
give it
fine.
to you. I'll give it to you, Fred.
Okay. So, hey, I didn't really think about what to present, but what I'll do is I'll show you this. I mean, can you guys see the website there?
Yep.
Perfect. Let me get this in a better spot. All right. So, I mean, what I just wanted, I mean, we have resources out there, and I mean, this is for you guys as commissioners, but also for the public at large. There are resources related to planning on our website. So basically anything that you could be interested in doing is here. So if you want to do a land use application, you can apply, or you can find the land use applications on the website. Also, like for you guys, as we're going through criteria and whatnot for land use applications, you can find all of the development code that I always reference online. It's just on the web page. You can find that there, and you can see the various subchapters for the code. So I just wanted to sort of point that out. I mean, you'll note that this is where all of these things that we've been working on sort of live. So you'll recognize our matrices and whatnot. That's all on the website. If you ever need to find it again, you can just go to the website and find it. Whoops. Also, like any sort of the plans that the city has that you might be interested in, we also have those online. So you can, I think that this is supposed to be 20, that's an error. So I mean, if you want to see the vision plan, you can find that there. If you want to see our comprehensive plan, you can find that here. And so when I cite the comprehensive plan, you can come here, you can see the element or whatever that I'm referencing, and you can find out what that says. That's all online. We've tried, I mean, it was kind of disjointed a little bit for a while, but we have really tried to make this a lot clearer for folks to find. And we have comprehensive plan documents, the Southwest plan, we talk about that a lot. You can find that online as well. So you can see, I mean, the whole document, you can see how it lays out. If you're ever interested in it, you can search all of this stuff and find whatever you might be looking for. Our transportation system plans, our parks and open space master plan. Also, some new things that we've just recently put on are the historic preservation documents. And so this is actually our district designation document. If you're ever interested in the historic district, you can actually see the document that was approved in 1989. And you can go through and you can look at what it says about each of the properties. So, if you've got a historic property, you can come here, you can try and find your address here. I mean, it's kind of tricky to find. You got to reference it to the map. But I mean, if you look for your address, you'll find it if you're in the district. So anyways, I think that's cool. And at the end of the document, I'll just point this out because this is kind of neat. Let's wait. Of course, it's going to take a while. Is some older pictures, which are just, fun to look at. Like this house right here. I would have sworn that no one in their right mind would have put this roof on this house, but look at it. It's a historic that when I originally saw that roof, I thought that's a different roof line. That can't be the original one, but look, apparently it is. I'll be darned. So anyways, you can just go through, you can see some of the historic pictures. So it's a good resource. Also some of our utility plans, and then various other documents. So that's all online. Also, when we're going through planning projects and code changes, you can see these on the website too. I tend to put these on here just so people can track this stuff. This is not something that you're working on, but it's a larger city conversation. But also, you'll remember just recently we put on major development projects. And so this just sort of tracks what's going on in the city and where projects are at. So you'll see, like, you guys had a public hearing on Spies Independent Subdivision for duplex lots, preliminary subdivision approved, engineering under review. So just sort of a simple description of what's going on in the city. So that's a lot of the stuff on our website. And I just emphasize it because it is a nice little resource that is there. Oh, also, I'll just point this out for folks. This is something that got done a while ago. We have, if you're in the historic district, we do have a map that can, where you can see your property and what it might say about your property. So let's choose 386 Monmouth. So you can see this nice little house here. You can see that it was built in 1880. It's a primary classification in the district, and then you can see what the original designation said about the property. So it's a nice little resource to find out more about the city. So all of this stuff is there. You know, this is really the stuff that we try and make land use decisions on and use to make informed decisions about proposals. We put this all out there for folks so they can look at it too. So we're not like doing stuff in the dark. So it's all there. Just wanted you guys to know it. And if you haven't explored it before, definitely feel free to explore it. I'll just point out one more thing since we're waiting for Natasha. There is a historic, oh, apparently Natasha is, oh, hi Natasha. So I'll just point this out. There is a historic preservation grant going on right now. So details about that historic preservation grant are available online. So that in short is what's going on with the website. Definitely, if you want to find out more about Independence, there's a lot of good information on it. So that is my spiel about that.
All right. Well, thank you, Fred. Okay. Well, and hello, Natasha. How are you? We called the meeting to order and had a little discussion with Fred to get some time going by. So took the roll call, and now we're ready to approve the minutes from the May 3rd, 2021 meeting. So if everybody's had a chance to review if there are any changes to be made. If not, we could have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Was there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to
Okay.
approve the minutes.
All those in favor?
I'll second. Kate seconds.
Sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Minutes are approved for the May 3rd, 2021 meeting. Okay, we'll move right along to visitor and public comments, which probably we'll just have some folks when
There's nobody in the audience.
nobody, okay. And we'll do a staff report in a few minutes. We don't have any unfinished business that I can say, so let's go ahead and move to the new business, the public hearing. LA 2021-03, the Transportation System Plan update. So, Mr. Evander, I'll have you read your part, please.
Thank you, Chair Chappelle. I appreciate that. So anyways, this evening, the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on legislative amendment LA 2021-03 to consider amendment of the Independence Development Code and Comprehensive Plan. These revisions would amend the language necessary to accommodate the adoption of the Transportation System Plan. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the City Council based on the complete record, including the testimony received at tonight's public hearing. These proceedings will be recorded. This hearing will be held in accordance with the land use procedures required by the city and the state of Oregon. This is a type 4 legislative procedure. At the beginning of the public hearing tonight, staff will identify the applicable substantive criteria from the city's comprehensive plan and/or state of Oregon statewide planning goals. For anyone wishing to speak, we are asking you to use the speaker cards that are provided. When called upon to speak, you must be recognized by the chair and you must state your name and address for the public record. Before we begin, does any commissioner wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in this matter? All right.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and now open the public hearing for LA 2021-03. And Fred, can we have the staff report, please?
You bet. So the city has been working on the transportation system plan update for maybe a little over a year during the time of COVID. So it's been an interesting process, but you know, it's been it's been a fun process to be around and to be involved in. Basically, the purpose of the transportation system plan is to provide sort of the comprehensive plan basis for the city's the long-range vision for the city's transportation system. We started doing this based on the fact that the city had been growing super rapidly. Regional increases in traffic had been increasing, and you know, city infrastructure investment and north, south, east, west in the community were connections in the community were not keeping pace with the growth that we were seeing. So based on that, we applied for a TGM grant through the state to help us update our transportation system plan. As part of that, we did bring Kittleson and Associates on board, and Matt Bell, who's on the call with us tonight. Through that process, we have engaged a lot of people. I don't exactly know the complete numbers, but we've talked to small groups, we've talked to people on the street, we've stirred up hornets' nests on Facebook, we've produced YouTube videos. We've done all of that stuff to try and get the most feedback that we could about this plan. Also, we've prepared pamphlets and distributed them to apartment complexes and downtown businesses, all of that stuff. Through the project, we've sort of tracked what are some of the existing issues in the community, what does future growth look like, and how does it impact the roadway system, all of that sort of stuff. And based on that, we have prepared a plan that's before you tonight. The plan proposes projects that cost approximately $64.7 million, and that's like a ton of money. Like, I recognize that, but that's also going to be done partially because with grants and partially with developer funded projects. The high priority projects cost about $18.3 million. And some of those major high priority projects include the construction of the Southern Arterial that we've talked about for a long time. It was also in the 2007 Transportation System Plan. New intersection improvements at Polk and Maine, River Road in Maine, and Gun Club in Monmouth, and then a centered two-way left turn lane from 4th to 7th on Monmouth. Now, we didn't just focus just on cars, so we identified projects that would improve the system for bikes and peds, pedestrians, and things like transit. And so what we've come up with is really some what I consider good, nice ideas about how to design that system. And basically, if I could summarize the system simply, is we've sort of identified major transportation routes through the community that we'd like to establish, like major car projects that we've identified through the city. But we've also identified sort of like, I guess I'll go like this, like non-motorized systems that sort of fit in between those things. So we're creating a system for non-motorized travelers that's safe, that's low stress, that's well suited for all ages and abilities. That's really the concept that's come out of this, is how to create that network and focus not just on the cars, but build a nice system for people of all ages, all abilities. There's projects in there for bikes, there's projects in there for transit. So yeah, basically through the whole process, we've talked to a lot of people. We've heard a lot of different ideas. We have incorporated a lot of that stuff into the plan. Also, we've, for this update, there is an associated code change that goes with it. You will see that attached to your packet. That code change specifically is on page, oh shit. Page 79 of your packet. Basically, as part of it, Kittleson and their team looked at our code. It was Angelo Planning Group that was looking at our code, and based on the requirements, the transportation planning requirements that we had to meet, they proposed some changes that we had to make to the code. One of those was consolidating the review of applications. That's pretty simple. They're just actually moving it kind of forward in our code, so it's not just in one type of action, but you could consolidate the review of a number of different things, not just type, I think it was type 2 actions. Also, they recommended small changes to the language related to public and quasi-public uses. You'll see that in the code. And also, there was a requirement that we, when a parking lot's a certain size, that there's internal pedestrian connectivity inside the parking lot. So we put that in one place. Basically, all of those make good sense, to me at least, and they're requirements under the transportation planning rule that were suggested. Angelo Planning Group also suggested a couple of other changes, but those were not required changes to make, and so those will probably come before you at a later date, where we can have more time to discuss those changes. So based on all of that, we took all of this material, ran it through the the Department of Land Conservation and Development public process. We issued a notice for it. We have not heard any comments, additional comments through those notice periods. So based on all of that, and based on the conformance of this with the criteria and the comprehensive plan and the code, we recommend approval of this draft TSP. We do recognize that there are a couple of changes that Matt Bell is going to kind of identify tonight that should be made in the document between now and council time, but we're comfortable with those changes. We've talked with Matt about those changes. So based on that, recommend approval. Are there any questions from me perfect. Now, I would like Matt Bell just to say a couple of quick words about the plan. He can sort of identify the high levels stuff in the plan, but yeah, sounds good.
Thank you, Fred.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. I'm still trying to put my head together about how to go about presenting. Fred, you covered a lot of ground in your introduction there and overview, so I'm hesitant to repeat a lot of the stuff you just said.
Hey, Matt, can you talk just a little bit louder, or can your mic be just a little bit better?
How about that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, I had to make sure that I was actually talking into my mouthpiece here. But yeah, so just maybe just to build a little bit on what Fred was saying, and a couple things that I think are pretty important to make note of is that this planning process was a very involved process. Fred mentioned that we had a project management team that was made up of city staff, ODOT staff, that oversaw the entire process. We had a couple different advisory committees, both a technical advisory committee and citizens advisory committee. These guys reviewed and essentially confirmed a lot of the work that we did throughout this process, provided us with just a ton of comments. I was even just noticing that in the draft version that you guys saw, between the draft version and the adoption version, between all the comments we got from you folks, as well as from during our last work session together, as well as comments that we got from the advisory committees, we had a pretty significant number of comments that went into this initial adoption draft. And so those committees absolutely valuable to the overall process. Fred mentioned that we had a pretty robust public involvement process, and I was really pleased with the outcome of each one of the virtual public meetings. Despite the COVID-19 restrictions, we had a lot of folks come out and provide us with a lot of feedback there. We also had some good participation for those YouTube live events that we held to supplement the open houses, and we also got a lot of good feedback via the project website. I think something that was a little bit unique about this project is that we were developing a stakeholder database throughout this project of just folks that had participated, that had plugged their email in and asked to be updated as things were updated on the project website. So there's a little over 40, maybe close to 50 folks who had essentially subscribed to this process, people that may like to get involved in further public involvement processes down the road. So again, a lot of really good input to the plan. So we feel like we have pretty good broad-based support there. Just a couple things on the plan itself, and I have a presentation that I'm hesitant to put it up here again, just because there's been covered a lot of this ground already. But as Fred alluded to, there the couple of things that we want to do, if you guys have had a chance to take a close look at the TSP prior to today, the couple of the things that I think are a little bit unique and things that we might want to tweak is we presented a series of cross sections for the different functional classifications of roadways. And one of the things that Fred and I have been talking about just in the last few days or so is adding in an additional cross section to allow for a shared use path on one side of the roadway. And this would likely be applying to a number of the higher classification roads. So right now, most of the streets within the current TSP, within the current roadway design standards, are really looking for sidewalks and bike lanes and travel lanes fairly consistently between the different classifications. Well, this would allow for the development of a narrower cross section for the street, but would provide a shared use path, a nice landscape separated shared use path on one side of the road, where the bicyclists and pedestrians and folks could utilize for some longer distance travel. And as we've went around and around about that one. One of the things that we talked about was that that type of treatment would have to be implemented on a fairly would have to be fairly consistent along a particular roadway segment for it to be really effective. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of back and forth across the street. But I think it's a good treatment. It's one that we've seen in a lot of other communities, and one that can really help provide those, as Fred was saying before, some of those lower stress facilities for people with young children that don't necessarily want to be riding in the street. Another minor change in there is that we had originally included an East Street bridge. If you remember that one of the things that we were trying to emphasize through this project was East Street as that parallel multimodal corridor to OR 51 or Monmouth Street that would really accommodate the majority of the when I say multimodal, I mean bike and pedestrian trips. So 51 or Monmouth Street it has some constraints, particularly when you're east of Ash Street. West of Ash Street, it's a pretty wide open street that doesn't feel really comfortable for people to bike and to walk on. East, it's a fairly narrow street with but we have a lot of, as Fred was mentioning earlier, historical homes and a lot of existing development that we don't want to impact. So rather than make a lot of modifications along that roadway that would really require relocating the curbs and disrupting a lot of the right of way out there that's there today, we've been emphasizing East Street as that parallel route. So to make that a consistent roadway, we added in a bridge. And right now the bridge is shown on the roadway plan when we really need to shift that over to the ped and bicycle plan. So that would be one of the other changes that you'll see between this draft and the final adoption draft that we sent to the City Council. And the last thing I'll mention there is that we had sort of at the last minute, but maybe not quite, we had incorporated all of the comprehensive plan policies on transportation into one of the early chapters of the TSP as sort of overall transportation system policies. And upon further reflection on those, a lot of those policies are really addressed in other sections of the TSP, particularly the modal sections. And so we're just going to continue that process of highlighting the policies in the individual modal chapters and likely disregard that, not disregard, but redistribute or reallocate those policies throughout. So those are really I think the three key changes there. Otherwise, the TSP going forward will largely look like it does today. Did I miss anything in there, Fred?
No, I don't think so. The transportation system policies that he's talking about is in page 32 of your packet, page 10 of the TSP. You'll see that those policies got put in there, and it was kind of like, wait a second, where did these come from? So those would not be included. They're pretty well reflected elsewhere. And yeah, so that's the goal.
Yeah, and so maybe just to kind of wrap up here, I'd say that as Fred mentioned, the key themes, some of the key things that we talked about throughout the course of this project, particularly in our last few meetings with the advisory committees and our last couple of meetings with you folks, was the real emphasis of this plan is on improving connectivity, east-west, north-south connectivity throughout the community. It's on improving the operations and the safety and operations of a number of key intersections throughout the community, whether it's Polk in Maine, Monmouth in Maine, and River Road there, as well as multiple intersections throughout the area. We have a lot of new bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure to help establish that lower stress network and increase or improve access to transit. So most importantly is the plan provides an updated project lists for all the different modal chapters, within all the different modal chapters, and potential funding opportunities. So it's the TSP essentially establishes a basis for securing funding down the road. So I think that's probably all that I would want to share here. It's yeah, and otherwise I've got the pretty much everything open in front of me here. So if you have any questions, I'm available to answer.
You're muted, Corby.
Thank you, Matt. Pay attention here. Any commissioners have any questions of Matt or Fred? Okay, we'll move along to testimony. Nobody's out there still, Karen, waiting to talk?
No,
Well-
and I just checked the emails and we have not received any further emails or testimony that way.
Okay, well, I will go ahead. If there's no objections, I will now close the public hearing. So now it's just up to the vote time. And anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
Well, if you're interested in, at this point, in making a motion, Jason, would you please display the choices?
Aha.
I can go ahead and I move to recommend approval to City Council of the Transportation System Plan and also recommend approval of LA-2021-03 based on the findings and recommendations contained in the staff report.
With the changes as delineated this evening by both Fred and Matt Bell.
So do you want me to go ahead and add that in?
If you would, yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
And
because I
also-
think, Fred, isn't that, don't you wish that? Okay.
So I will go ahead and reread it. I move to recommend approval to City Council of the Transportation System Plan and also recommend approval of LA-2021-03 based on the findings and recommendations contained in the staff report, as well as the recommendations of Fred and Matt, as discussed this evening during the meeting.
That work, Karen?
Works for me.
You have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Right. Big step.
Thank you very much, Matt. Sure appreciate your work on it.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Matt.
Bye.
All right. Kind of take a deep breath there after all that work. So we can move along to other discussion and information items. 8.1 neighborhood commercial uses.
Perfect.
You have another staff report for us, Fred?
Well, you know, it's not much of one, but like, let's, so basically, you'll remember that we had talked about this, and what's driving this fundamentally is the way that our the way that our mixed residential zone reads is a 2,000 square foot commercial use can be allowed permitted outright. And so that sounds great. I mean, but it sort of leaves some technical questions that sort of linger in my mind. Like, what if I wanted to put two 2,000 square foot commercial buildings in the same building? Would they still be permitted? Would it still be a permitted use? What if I put 4 in the same building? Would it still be permitted? And I think that it leaves some questions. And so based on that, I feel like we should sort of clarify what exactly that 2,000 square feet means. And so I did prepare, and shoot, I should have pulled it open. I did prepare a little graphic and thing to discuss with you folks so we can actually make sure that we're all on the same page with what this means. Once we discuss this and once we're all on the same page, then I feel like we can then say to ourselves, hey, does this actually make sense to apply elsewhere in the community? Does this only make sense in the Southwest area, or are there other places that this might apply? So that's really what I'm hoping that we can achieve tonight. So let me pull open share my screen here. That's the wrong one. And share this. All right, can you see my screen? Perfect. Now you'll see, here's my little problem statement. We allow 2,000 square foot commercial uses as a permitted use in the Southwest area, but I just don't know exactly how that works. Can they be anywhere in the Southwest area? Can they be spread out, or should they be grouped together? Should there be a size limit on the size of commercial buildings? Should it be just 2,000 square feet? Or should it be 4,000 square feet? Or should it be like 6,000 square feet? Is there a limit on what we're talking about? Could you put two businesses next to each other? Or what would happen if somebody said, hey, you know what, I want to put 4 businesses next to each other? What if I want to put more businesses, right? That's my Dr. Seuss for you. 2 businesses, 4 businesses, more businesses, right? It's perfect, right? I thought that was good. Right. And then, you know, should they have a particular look? Do we want these to look more commercial? Do we want them to look more residential? All of these things are things that I feel like we need to address. So let's, I guess, sort of talk about these little by little. What do you folks think?
I'll start.
Okay.
I like, this is like ordering off a menu. I like the spread out version and limit to a 2,000 square foot building.
Okay.
I think if you get into the group or in bigger buildings, and it's, especially if this is going to be intermixed into you know, houses and things, I think it would lend itself to be more friendly. That's just my opinion.
All right. Thanks for that, Corby.
Yeah, it's funny because I think I'm on the. I like the cluster more than the spread out, to be honest. I like the little commercial pocket versus diffused sort of commercial bits around. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's just my sense right off the bat. And I'm just saying that just because I think about little sort of potential business clusters that become like, I talk a lot, I feel like my day-to-day about third places. So it's not work, it's not home, it's a third place. And I think of like those little areas being, you know, third places that aren't work or home.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, that's just my.
I agree with Alex. I think just, and again, we haven't had this is more of a gut reaction or initial reaction to things. I guess my worry would be, or I guess I'll say it this way. I like the idea of clustering like things together. And I could probably, if I had more caffeine today, could match you, Fred, on some sort of Dr. Seuss-esque, you know, clustering like things together. But so I would worry if it's too spread out. I think people like to have some amount of predictability about what could potentially happen in their neighborhood. Like if they're purchasing a house or moving into an area, and then you wonder, well, what if a commercial building goes up right next to me? Is there any way to predict that? And if it's interspersed throughout, that might be harder to maybe control or to kind of shape some of that versus clustering it together. And usually with the business clusters, they benefit from each other of having, you know, increased foot traffic or visibility versus if you have these little pockets that are just spread out throughout the neighborhood. And then I would also think from like a transportation or a traffic perspective, if things are sort of clustered, there might be some shared resources there versus, again, kind of having them dispersed throughout. But I do like the idea of limiting the size and the look and the feel regardless.
What other communities have this kind of thing going on, Fred? Have you researched what other communities are doing, how they go at this?
Shoot, where's my, do I make this big?
I guess I wouldn't be opposed to the grouped, but I would want it still like maybe 2 businesses in a 4,000 square foot building.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm thinking about is like here's the coffee shop, here's a flower shop, you know, maybe a boutique clothing store kind of thing. I mean, yeah, people would have to walk, or even like a small grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
I guess
so
I just want to be at like a small mini mall.
yeah, so here's what I think we were originally thinking. I think we were originally thinking, hey, let's give people the opportunity to do some business down there. And I think we kind of said it, and then we didn't quite like actually think about how it might work. And I think that this is really a good opportunity for us to think, okay, how might these things work? And I think that if it were to work, that ultimately here's my perspective. It would be sort of at a node of more um, bigger streets. So it'd be at the node of 2 collectors. And if we said sort of up front, hey, you realize that you have a possibility of doing some sort of commercial use at an intersection like this, then people might think, oh, that makes sense. Right now, as it is, it's sort of like mixed residential. And a lot of people are going into it and thinking primarily residential, and they're not really giving a thought like, hey, wait, I can actually create a neighborhood here. And so like this is like this seems to me like if we could sort of specify how this might work, then people might start thinking, wait, I could do something like a neighborhood here. I could do something innovative. You know, but I think it's really important because I mean, we don't want to, I think that there is probably a size limit that we want to consider because we don't want to create a whole bunch of space that might detract from the downtown in some way or and anything like that. You know, it's I mean, I think that it's supposed to be primarily neighborhood served. We wouldn't want I don't know. So those are just some of my thoughts. Those are some of the things I'm thinking about.
Well, what comes to mind, we were over in Bend a few years ago, and it's a pretty brand new subdivision on west side of Bend going towards Black Butte. And you drive into a neighborhood and lots of really nice houses. And here, like on a 4-corner, you know, intersection, there'd be like 2 or 3 small businesses right there, like a bar, or not bar, but like a small restaurant. And I think I remember one was a flower shop, maybe like a Hallmark shop kind of thing. So I guess based at the intersection location, it makes sense to have more there in a group situation. So
Well, and I think it's also looking at the types of uses that might pop up. And so if you have, say, more of an example where it's interspersed, and I mean, we think of things like, oh, a little coffee shop or a flower shop, but then suddenly your neighbor says, oh, I'm going to start up an automotive shop right next to here. And you're like, oh, that's not quite what I maybe had imagined for like the use next to me. You know, so I think some of that does depend on or comes down to what type of use it is and how that integrates with a neighborhood or more of like if the perception is that it's going to be a lower density housing or kind of traditional residential housing neighborhood, then some of the uses might be a little bit more problematic to people than others.
That makes sense. So do you have a particular perspective on what do you have a thought about ultimate size that you would have concerns about? Do you have a concern about the number of businesses that should be in a cluster, like, or a group?
I don't know if I have enough. I'm not sure I have tons of sort of heartburn around the number, but it seems like I don't know, it seems like like a big commercial style would be more useful from just like from a tenant perspective, from like actually attracting somebody versus residential, but then also like that changes the look of the neighborhood. So I almost, I don't want to send you on any kind of goose chase, but I almost feel like I need probably a little bit more or like a case study of, like what's this look like in practice in the real world, and it's not, instead of illustrations in terms, I don't think I can probably speak with any sort of clarity around. I like the idea around intersections though. I do like or a collector, it's just sort of higher traffic streets and not like necessarily tucked away at the back of a neighborhood that's not meant to support. I mean, ultimately we're trying not to, I think the intent was to make it walkable. So it's not necessarily a drive, you're going to get in a car and drive to the ends of the neighborhood where this little commercial pocket is. It would be something either convenient on the way home or, within a quarter mile, of any place that you are, you should be able to walk to a commercial spot or a park, right? I think that's the original discussion. So right. I mean, it seems you almost have to go through it. I know there's just like a big green zone in your map that you put in the packet. It almost seems like it needs to just be like intersections or along, I guess, those streets. But then I probably would want to limit the number of total number. And then the other question I have, and this is maybe completely naive, but what does that look like for new developments? Like, so if somebody's proposing something, do they have to have a little commercial pocket included? Because if somebody puts a single family house there, then that may never, it'll just it might be a house forever. So what does that look like? And we can't force people to do things, obviously, but I just wonder. Right.
So, I think that's a good question. Can you guys see this map?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I mean, it's sort of like what you're saying is, I just drew these based on where probably the intersections of the collectors would be. And so sort of just kind of picking up where something like that might be. Now, there might be something like this here. Would that happen in every place? Probably not. But if we created the opportunity to say, and I agree with you completely, Alex, that I feel like this is like a really important sort of concept. We've sort of said, hey, yeah, you can do them anywhere, right? And that almost seems like that's the wrong approach. Instead, it seems like we should almost say, hey, we've identified some key areas where this might work, and we should target those. So when people come in those areas, we could say, hey, you have a potential to do something like this here, and potentially it captivates them. But no, it would be one of those things where we would allow it and almost encourage it, but not necessarily mandate it. And we could do it in a few different areas. And if we could identify a few different areas that it could work. And if somebody took us up on it, that would be great.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, yeah, I like that approach, Fred. That sort of seems to be, yeah, I mean, can't force it, but highly encourage and definitely want to work with whoever would be interested in, pursuing it.
Yeah, exactly.
And going that way there wouldn't be such a big impact on the parking then, would there? I mean, if it was more businesses at one location, would it be just street parking, or would there be off-street
that-
parking then?
That's another sort of question, is how would, I mean, the parking at a certain point is gonna be a consideration. And so you'll see like, for a 4,000 square foot building, 8 parking spaces would be necessary. And I just sort of drew each of these up, and I'm like, cause that is too gonna, sort of, I mean, be a consideration. I mean, would you folks be fine with a situation where on-street parking could count toward the total?
I think I am personally. I think that I don't love the idea of parking lots in neighborhoods, even if it is on a collector. Maybe like 3 little spots, like, or like, some sort of simple configuration, but having to like take a plot for parking when it's meant to not be necessarily a driving destination, and more of a either, I mean, guess on the way, or just a walk, walk in the neighborhood. So
Mhm.
I think I would definitely be in favor of letting the on-street parking count towards it, especially if there's a way to designate that for commercial use during the daytime or during certain hours. I think we do have to consider employee parking. So the likelihood, I mean, it would be nice to think that somebody could live in that neighborhood that, owned that shop or worked in that shop, but that's probably not super realistic. And so making sure that that could be accommodated so that you're not defeating the purpose by having all your employees park in the street parking and then not having any place for the customers to park. And then also accommodating deliveries. Like if you have a small, little mini grocery store, convenience market, being able to accommodate the deliveries and not be blocking residential traffic and loading zones and that sort of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Now, one more question. I guess 2 more. Do you folks have a preference? What do you think about the idea of a mixed use building?
I definitely think it's positive. I mean, especially like, going up, I think we'd have to be a little bit careful of that. But I think in neighborhoods like this, where it is kind of a mixed, commercial, or you're allowing kind of that residential commercial blend, as we grow, being able to accommodate different types of housing. And I think, the townhomes down by the riverfront development have shown that people do like having a choice. Not everybody does want to have a single family. And maybe there is a way to combine commercial retail on the bottom with apartments up above. I think it could serve a real purpose in these neighborhoods of being able to accommodate that.
All right. Well, and I mean, I assume like the front door should be located toward the street. I mean, part of the reason I bring that up is there was a community that will remain nameless that I used to do a lot of work with, and they had standards to require buildings to be set at the front lot line, right? And so what did people do? They put their parking lots behind the building. Well, where's the front door then? Toward the back of the building where the parking lot is. And it's like, why don't you guys have a standard that says the front door has to be toward the street?
I guess the one question, I mean, I don't know the answer to this, so it's mostly rhetorical, but it's like, so yeah, if you go up, what does that building look like relative to the rest of the neighborhood in terms of, does it look residential or does it look commercial? I can see, it's just, I mean, I also don't want to be that prescriptive in a lot of ways, right? And like box somebody in, no pun intended, like, what, like where they have to go and how they have to do something. So, but I like the idea of that mix of housing, like what Kate's saying, right? Of it's a different type of house, in a neighborhood of single family homes, having the little loft apartment or something like that, or some sort of mixed use thing is is neat. And right. I think it speaks to the, diversity of housing types that we're, trying to go for.
Totally. Cool. Now let me just ask So based on all of that, let me just ask the question about a couple of these industrial areas. Like, I mean, again, this is not saying we're taking away your industrial use. It's just sort of, if we applied it in a place like the old mill site or out here on Stryker Road or even in this industrial park area, it would give folks the opportunity to do something like that. It would just essentially say, hey, and really I do see it as kind of like an overlay zone, like, hey, since you have this unique site where you're at the intersection of two major roads or sort of in this spot or wherever, you can take this set of standards and apply them to a portion of your property. It wouldn't be the entire property, but like you could put a commercial style building on, or a commercial sort of use on a portion of the property. What do you folks think about applying something like that in an industrial area in the community?
I don't think I like that as much, to be honest. Partially because, and my day job at doing economic development, like industrial properties are hard enough to come by, and it's always about highest and best use for those. And I think it starts to put pressure if you have a good, like a bigger industrial user, when you have sort of citizens or residents making their way onto properties, or it's a harder blend to me to think about, from partially from like a safety standpoint, partially from just like logistics, like day to day of having sort of people buy your property, or who you don't trying to control. And I know there's fences, and people have generally put up safety and security and whatnot, but it seems like it gets complicated if somebody took something like that and just threw a commercial zone. It seems like it needs a better designated area if you're going to mix it in like that. Like I know like Mill Creek in Salem has, I think they just put in a gas station right at Cordon Road, sort of adjacent to it, but it's across the street. It's a little bit different. And also too, it doesn't, I don't think it works quite as well at an independent scale with the smaller industrial areas. It's just
So let me ask you specifically about like the industrial park area right there at Gun Club and Hoffman. Like if you cut off a piece of this and kept all of this site, say, behind it, could something like that work?
I actually think, honestly, it probably works in both spots really well if you carved out a piece. I'm just trying to think about what it looks like when you're trying to, match make sort of for a user for a vacant industrial site. And I guess at that point, if it's vacant, like it's up to them to exercise their option to either carve that off or stand something up. So then it's so I guess I'm just arguing with myself. I guess it works in both senses. And for these specific instances, I think it works pretty well, actually. But I think I'm conditioned to be protective of industrial property, just inherently. So that's me. Maybe it's my own bias. I own it. So you can argue with me, please.
I think one of the concerns I agree with Alex, and in theory, I like it. I like being able to provide people options and flexibility to do something that works. But humans are predictable in the sense that somebody always likes to complain, and then you get a residential use that, even though you're like, look, you willingly moved into this mixed use, you knew there was light industrial right next to you, and they complain about the smells or the noise or something adjacent, and they have that expectation that this is a residential use for them, and they want those same controlled kind of maybe standards or something, versus, or they're thinking like, yes, they say it's mixed use now, but there's all these residential uses moving in. And so surely that's going to then flip to more of a residential expectation. That would be my concern with some of those areas without putting some more parameters around it.
So let's just take again the industrial. I'm taking this one because I mean this is like I mean it's undeveloped. If that was not, if mixed use was not allowed there, would you folks, because I mean we just sort of talked about the mixed use specifically in the southwest area. If it was just a commercial sort of use in that area and it was, I mean, again, I don't know, would you feel any different?
I mean, the industrial park zoning, it makes more sense for that use because you're figuring that it's going to, in an ideal, it's an actual industrial park. And so there's, scattered businesses already. And so it's just a different kind of business that's in one of those places. So that's a little bit easier. It's not just like, it's not heavy, it's not like manufacturing, larger scale, I guess, industry by design. But the reality is I don't know what that's going to look like, especially for that zone. But it makes probably the most sense right there because it's not next to bigger industrial projects. I think when I look at industrial properties, when you get something, it's like truck traffic and what is that, and so when you start mixing foot traffic and car traffic and what bicycle traffic and everything else, it seems like you could be creating some friction there. It makes more sense probably in that industrial park zoning. And then also, allows that whole neighborhood like right south of there to have something. Granted, then of course you have people crossing Hoffman, right? And that's lots of things to
Totally.
play with. Yeah.
Totally.
So I think on the surface, I mean, of course, we've talked about this a bunch, right? I think we all like this kind of like this thinking of quarter mile from any commercial zone or a park or something like that. It's really hard to implement given the things are already built out.
Yeah.
And so, in an ideal world, you may, wave a magic wand, I guess, and then okay, well, here's a spot, but there's a house there right now. It doesn't quite work. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but based on all of that, I think that you guys have given me a good direction to at least pursue a little more. You've helped me think about what you guys are thinking about. So I mean, all of that's super valuable. What I'll do is I'll try and get some good examples of how people have done this elsewhere and just try and look at some of the building typologies that have gotten built and what it looks like. And I'll try and bring some of those in. We can talk about maybe some of the look and feel and even some of the scale stuff together.
I mean, I think it's the easiest when we're talking about the southwest corner because it's not built yet.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to see, and if you had a case study around places where you're talking about around the industrial park or just east of the air park, who has done something like that well, if at all, because maybe I can easily imagine it not having been done particularly well either anywhere. So
right.
and I also understand that these are all sort of fingerprints. They're all unique. There's not really a rubber stamp version of this. So
I think if we could see what's going on in other communities, it would help me definitely think about it. But all right. I can't remember the name of the subdivision in Bend. I mean, it was pretty massive, and one of the houses we stopped and looked at was for sale was 1.2 million, and that was 7 years ago. Yeah, it's a little bit pricey for me.
That's tripled by now.
Probably, yeah. Beautiful area though. All right. Any other questions tonight? Comments?
Thanks for sticking with us, Fred. I appreciate you keep bringing it up and following up on it.
This is good. It was was one of those things that I sort of was planning on pushing a little back, and then I like just sort of banged out like some stuff in a day. I'm like, oh shoot, this is like good talking points. Like we can start trying to move this forward little by little. This is not something that I anticipate being done super quick. I mean, but it's something that I feel like, hey, it's a good discussion. It gives us frameworks to think about. And I mean, something cool will come out of it.
Well, better have that discussion now where we can think about it and keep, talking about it, and then have a good solid plan put into place.
Yeah.
Plus with the TSP, it seems like good timing when we're talking about interconnectivity, livability, all those things. Like, yeah, this is totally right in the same, sort of vein.
Yeah.
So that was 7 years ago in 14 years ago. So is it every 10 to 20 years that, if I'm still around, will we?
Yeah. If you're still around in probably 10 years, I bet you we'll be doing another TSP.
Just as the need arises with growth and in size. Okay.
Yeah.
But I just turned 64, so we'll see. All right. If there aren't any other comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Have a second?
No.
A second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm the only one left.